truly embracing your complexities means rejecting anything that can harm who you are, like smoking cigarettes, which can damage nearly every part of your body. Tap the banner to see more. This free life. Freedom to be tobacco-free.
Prepare for glory!
I wanna know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready?
I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, brought to you guys by the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network that we are glad and proud to be a part of. You can find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter, and definitely check out their website, fulltimefantasy.com. It's not only our pod, but a bunch of pods. They've been bringing in a great group of fantasy football advice that you can, a smorgasbord of fantasy football people out there they've brought in here. It's a great site, up and running. Check them out, our pod on there, along with a bunch of others. And as always, we have Mr. Dennis Bennett with us today. What's going on, Dennis?
Man, it's already autumn here in Ohio. It's rainy, it's cloudy, it's cold. I can't believe it. We had one day of spring, one day of winter. I think the leaves are going to start falling.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me, and I hate jumping in and talking about weather, but I mean, it's been extremely nice here in Texas, which is surprising for it being summertime. But we've got a couple things we want to talk about on here today. Before we jump into, we're going to do a little game here. We've got two Dynasty Nerds writers coming on with us. Maybe. We know for sure one. The other guy is in transit, so he may join us mid-game here, but we will definitely have a little bit of fun here with this game. We wanted to talk about the Listener League, so
in 2019, 10 random people came together to form the Knights of the Fantasy Football Roundtable. They challenged the host of this program in deep fantasy battle. In hopes of dethroning one of these hosts and proving that they themselves are the best in all of fantasy football. The fight will rage on through the entire 2019 season. Will one of these 10 owners be able to dethrone the host, or will the host end up ruling the day once again?
Last Monday, we put out a pod talking about some IDP stuff. Dennis was invited on to the IDP Tipsters podcast, and they had awesome job there, awesome podcast. They hooked us up with 2 free yearly subscriptions to their website, $25 value, which is pretty damn good if you ask me, especially for people who like IDP leagues. We had about 6 submissions, which is a little disappointing, but we do appreciate the 6 people that did it. We are going to announce the winners here, so you guys are both getting into the Listener League, and you both are getting free subscriptions to IDP Tipster. So before we announce the winners, though, we want to talk about they've got a little subscriber promo contest going on right now for IDP fans. It's a drawing for an insider membership. It will happen from May 26th, which is already obviously passed, through my goodness, Matt, through July. My goodness, I can't read, guys. June 29th. So you guys got about a couple more weeks to do this. The cost of the entry is $5. Winners will be announced live on the IDP podcast on June 30th. 10% of every entry, guys, I just want you to know, stay in school. Stay in school, because this is ridiculous. I am struggling to read a very easy print here. 10% of entry participants win and will automatically be enrolled into the IDP Tipster Insider membership. Non-winners then are entered drawing have the option to pay for an additional $5 after drawing to receive IDP Insider membership. The original cost of the Insider membership is $25 a season. I apologize immensely for butchering that. English is not my first language. So, with that being said, let's announce the two winners now, as both of our guests are ready to go. So, I'm going home. This is it. I've given up. We're going home. I can't read or talk today. At Jack G. Will for dropping the awesome Myles Garrett gift there for us. A huge fan of Myles Garrett, so you won me over right there, but we do appreciate him sending that in. And second is at Blake_Barfield with a Cam Hayward IDP drop there. So we appreciate both you guys. We will get you into the Listener League here chat in a couple days to give you guys a chance to listen to this first, so you guys hear that you got in through the podcast, and we will get you guys on there. And I'll have Dennis, since he was the one who got hooked up with the IDP Tipster stuff, hit you guys up on Twitter on how to handle your guys' free subscription for a year to the IDP Tipsters. And we again really appreciate you guys for listening and dropping those gifts. There's still one spot open for rates and reviews. You guys drop a rate, drop a review, and one of you will be selected at random. Once we get up to 30 is what Dennis wanted, so that's what we're going to go for. If that doesn't happen by the time we're ready to do our draft, we may just pick someone who's already done it before that, or we may just pick a random person off Twitter. We haven't decided yet, but definitely if you guys can get it up to 30, we'll pick one, maybe pick two. We've got about 4 more entries we need to give away, and we're trying to fill that up so we can start working on getting the draft and rules all done. And as I mentioned in the intro, we've got 2 fellow Dynasty Nerd writers joining us today, Mr. Brandon Bangley, who actually both we've already had on the podcast as well, and Kyle Matheu. What is going on, guys? How you doing?
What's going on, man? Glad to be back in.
Oh, how's it going? Glad to be back for, second time ever podcasting and second time on this pod. So thank you guys for having me back on.
Nobody else will have you, huh?
Nope, just you. You guys are the only ones that'll take me.
Kill me.
All right, so I talked about this last week. We were bringing you guys on here to play a little bit of a game. So it's a little bit of what I like to call new faces and new places versus the old faces and old places. It's a little game where we're going to discuss players that have left the team and the players stepping into that role. Who will have the better season? Like when you broke up with your ex and then you're walking down the street and you see your new boo and you're like, oh man, but did I make the right decision here? She's lost a little bit of weight. She's looking kind of better now. So maybe a little bit of a boob enhancement. Like, things are looking pretty good over there. Did I make the right decision? That's what we're going to find out today. Did these GMs make the right decision in letting these players go and allowing these new players or younger players to step up in their spot? There's, of course, one battle in here that isn't really, but it's just because I want to get a couple of opinions because I know we're going to disagree, especially Brandon and Kyle on one of them, which I am excited about.
Ooh, I saw that one. I'm looking forward to it. I put a lone star by that one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Me too.
All right, so we're going to start with the quarterbacks, the most important position on the field.
Hey, you got here fast. I got a surprise for you.
Peter, as you know, I love you.
Are you breaking up with me?
Pete, are you,
Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. Obviously, Nick Foles led the Eagles to a Super Bowl a couple years ago and has played fairly well, especially in the playoffs, in Carson Wentz's absence, who obviously has dealt with a number of different injury issues. But again, before he got injured, when he blew out his knee against, the Rams. When he blew out his knee against the Rams, he was, in my opinion, the non-discussed. There's no way it was not going to go to him. He was the MVP of the league back then. That knee injury kind of cost him, and Tom Brady ended up getting that, but it was definitely going to Carson Wentz. Who do you think going into 2019 is going to have the better season, Carson Wentz or Nick Foles? Right now, all these ADPs are brought to you by the FFWC, who is running best ball drafts and dynasty drafts all year long. Carson Wentz has a current ADP of 97, while Nick Foles has an ADP of 172. We will go in alphabetical order of our guests, with Brandon first, Kyle, and then Dennis, since you're on with me all the time, we'll save your opinion for last. So Brandon, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, I don't think there's any reason to get cute here. I think that it's Carson Wentz by a proverbial landslide at this point. I mean, there's something to be said for Nick Foles. He's a gutsy quarterback. He's overcome lots of adversity.
Jeff Fisher.
Namely Jeff Fisher. He has good weapons in Jacksonville, but Carson Wentz, not only is he a better quarterback, not only is he mobile, he has better weapons in Philly. I think this is pretty simple. No reason to get cute.
No, I agree with Brandon. I mean, even Matt, talking about the ADP that you bringed up, Carson Wentz in the 90s, Nick Foles in the 170s, I believe. Even at that value, I'm still taking Wentz. I'm taking him for this year. I'm taking him in Dynasty. I'm taking him in redraft, any format. Pretty much going right off what Brandon said, better supporting cast. Even though they bumped up the supporting cast in Jacksonville a bit, better coaching, better offense in Philly. And honestly, he's far and away the better quarterback.
So the one argument I think you could make for taking Foles over Wentz, I believe Philly is going to be playing from ahead much more often than Jacksonville. So Philly will probably run the ball more. Jacksonville could potentially struggle to run the ball if, Fournette loses his mind again. You know, Alfred Blue is just a jag. Armstead's a good-looking rookie, but he's still just a rookie. The weapons in Jacksonville could potentially be really good. I love D.D. Westbrook. I think he's a baller.
Me too.
If the tight end comes around a bit, you've got DJ Chark, who is big and fast and can get down the field. So from a value perspective, Foles could provide the better value. Just a la Blake Bortles from 4 years ago, where they're playing from behind and throwing the ball a lot more. That I think is the only argument. I'm likely going to take Wentz and not risk hoping Foles is playing from behind. Foles does have a spotty history. It's fun to blame it on Jeff Fisher. I do it. But it might not just be Jeff Fisher. It might be that he's just a spotty quarterback.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you guys that Wentz is the easy answer, although I will disagree a little bit on Carson Wentz and Philly having the better supporting cast. I actually think Jacksonville has a really good team around Nick Foles. I actually think their defense is better than Philly's as well, so I don't know if that'll be... I could see Nick Foles not putting up as many points if Leonard Fournette comes back and is Leonard Fournette, because they are a run-first team. But I really think if you look at their wide receivers with Philly's, who on Philly are you taking? Are you really taking Alshon Jeffrey that much higher than some of the main guys there on Jacksonville? Running back by committee, your chances are you're going to lean more on Leonard Fournette than... I mean, I love Miles Sanders, but you've got right now Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Corey Clement, Darren Sproles if he comes back. I don't know if the supporting cast is that much better. The one position you obviously have a clear leap ahead is Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert at tight end. But I do agree with you guys. Carson Wentz is the easy call.
I think that Ertz and Goddard make all the difference there, though. Really.
How so?
Well, I mean, when you have two red zone weapons like that, that can both be on the field anytime, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be throwing in the red zone, and touchdowns count for 6 points. So
yeah, those two tight end sets are scary.
All right, well, I'm not disagreeing with you guys. Like I said, I would take Carson Wentz too. I know a lot of people are all in on Carson Wentz this year to finally kind of bounce back to what he was in his MVP year. I don't think it's as crazy as some other people do. So I do think Jacksonville does really have a good supporting cast around Nick Foles, and with John DeFilippo going there, which is when Nick Foles has played his best, when Filippo's been calling plays for him, I kind of like his chances to do something good in Jacksonville. The number one overall pick this year, Kyler Murray, who has a current ADP of 114 versus the guy that he kicked out of Arizona, and Josh Rosen, who's now in Miami with an ADP of 223. I feel like this one is probably a fairly easy answer as well, but Brandon, who do you think has a better 2019?
I'm going with Kyler Murray here. He's going to start from the jump there in Arizona. Josh Rosen will probably be sitting behind Ryan Fitzpatrick for at least the first 3, 4, 5 games. I think that the Cardinals are completely developing their offensive scheme around the pass and around Kyler Murray. And he's going to be the focal point on that team from the get-go, and I think it'll show in the fantasy points, starting at week 1 and all the way through. I just think that he's going to lap Rosen. As much as I like Rosen, and as much as I believe that Rosen will get his shot with the Dolphins, I think that for 2019, Murray is definitely the answer there.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going Murray, but for a main reason that's not being touched upon a lot, one thing that I really liked in the draft that's actually kind of coincidental because the Cardinals got Andy Isabella through the pick that they traded for Josh Rosen, but I think Andy Isabella does a lot of things similar to Marquise Brown, who put up, 1,300 plus yards, 10 touchdowns with Kyler Murray at quarterback. So I think Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keyshawn Johnson, I think they've surrounded Kyler Murray with weapons that can play on the outside and in the slot that Josh Rosen honestly just, besides Devontae Parker and the absurd offseason hype train, he doesn't have much to work with in Miami. And that's not even including the fact that Kyler Murray has insane rushing upside with his legs. So I'm agreeing. I'm going with Kyler Murray also.
So are we supposed to believe now that the NFC West is the Big 12? Is that what I'm hearing?
So volume is king, Dennis.
Volume is king. So the one thing I think that people are greatly overestimating is Murray having the ability to play all 16 games this year. I think he's going to be running for his life. And while certain aspects of that offense are designed to move the quarterback, it's going to be a college offense being adjusted to the pro game. Yes, they've brought in 3 wide receivers that really haven't played that much in that offense. A quarterback that played in that air raid style offense some. But you have to then convert all of these other offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, and get everybody on the same page. So there's going to be a learning curve getting them on the same page. And they didn't do anything to improve the offensive line. So I think Murray is going to get beat up. Yes, he's fast, but as we saw last year with Aaron Rodgers, it only takes one hit to really hamper your mobility. And I think Murray is going to be really susceptible to that. And when his lower body gets dinged up, I think it's going to really affect his ability to avoid trouble and his ability to get set to make the throws. So I think it's going to be a lot closer just because I think Rosen is going to outperform that 223 ADP substantially. I like what's going on in Miami. There's just as much new stuff going on in Miami as there is in Arizona. But I'm a Rosen fan. He was my QB1 last year. I don't think this season I would say probably didn't bear out that was the right way to go. Actually, maybe Darnold was my QB1. I don't remember for sure. That was a long time ago. But I like Rosen to substantially outperform that 223 ADP. I'm not sold on Murray. I didn't have him as my rookie QB1 coming into the draft, and I think he's going to have a lot more struggle. There's going to be definitely some phenomenal splash plays, but there's going to be some complete and utter nightmares out there too.
Yeah, I think for me it would be Kyler Murray. I know me and Dennis have kind of been on opposite ends of the spectrum here on Kyler Murray. I've been a big fan. I do think he's going to be a very good NFL quarterback. Don't think what Dennis is saying is wrong on some of the things that he could possibly be doing, but I also think he got one of the best wide receivers in the draft in Hakeem Butler. We won't dive down that road because that'll cause some hurt feelings, probably more on my end than anybody else's. But Josh Rosen, I think he is going to have a decent year. Actually, I agree with Dennis. I like what they're doing in Miami. If Mike Gesicki can actually take a step forward a little bit here, they've got a really good tight end. Everybody who listens knows me and Dennis love Preston Williams. I think he has a chance to be a really good wide receiver for him this year. Devontae Parker, we'll see. I mean, who knows? He could. This could be his year. This could be it. Maybe he's just a little bit slower than everybody else. So I do like what Miami's doing. They have Kenyon Drake, who I think could be very good as well. I think for me, the biggest thing and what's going to separate them is how long Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starter. If he starts out the season, it just depends, I think, on how long it takes for Josh Rosen to be put into that spot and start playing to make up the gap between him and Kyler Murray. But I don't think it's going to be quite as big as others do. Baltimore. We saw Baltimore get rid of Joe Flacco to the Denver Broncos, whose ADP right now is 210 for Lamar Jackson. Technically, we saw this happen last year when Joe Flacco suffered the injury. Lamar Jackson came in. Even though he couldn't hit the broadside of the barn, he was able to rush the ball for an ungodly amount. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he set all kinds of records at the QB position for rushing the ball. His ADP right now is 137. If you've been following any of the stuff on Twitter, he's throwing the perfect ball. He's looking like Joe Montana out there and Tom Brady. It's ridiculous. He's just throwing the ball so accurately.
I think you're absolutely right. I definitely think he's looking like Joe Montana.
Yeah,
not Joe Montana, but the actor Joe Montana.
Yeah, that was the whole point. I didn't know if any of y'all would catch the Waterboy reference in there, so that's why I threw it in there. But he's perfect out there. He's throwing the balls with no defenders rushing him or covering the wide receivers, looking like a baller out there. So, I feel like this one, again, is pretty easy, but who do you think has the better 2019 season, Joe Flacco or Lamar Jackson?
Well, I do think it is pretty simple. I think it's Lamar Jackson, but I'm not as lopsided on this one as some people may be. I think that Joe Flacco is going to have a pretty decent year in Denver. I think he's got some pretty good weapons out there, some emerging wideouts, some second-year guys in Hamilton and Sutton. Fant is obviously going to do some things on the field. But Jackson's rushing upside, regardless of how terrible his accuracy may or may not be, the rushing upside is going to propel him at least into high-end QB2, more than likely low-end QB1 territory. And unless he gets hurt, which is always a chance with rushing quarterbacks, I think it's pretty cut and dry that it will be Jackson ahead of Flacco.
See, I'm going to agree again, and it's not because I think Lamar Jackson is some fantastic quarterback. I don't even think he's a good quarterback, to be entirely honest. But honestly, I see Drew Lock knocking Joe Flacco out of that starting role probably midway through the season. And looking at Lamar Jackson's rushing numbers, solely his rushing numbers, he started 7 games last year and rushed the ball for 147 times throughout the season, which is just an ungodly number. I don't think either are fantastic passers at this point, so I'll take the guy that's going to be running the ball 12 to 15 times a game.
I think you kind of have to take Jackson, but I don't feel good about it. It's the only redeeming thing I see about that whole situation is I own Mark Ingram on a team or two, and I own Mark Andrews on a team or two, and I think Andrews is going to catch a lot of the passes Jackson is lucky enough to complete, and Ingram is going to lead the team in rushing despite Jackson's best effort. Now, I don't think Ingram gets a lot more carries than Jackson because I think Jackson is going to, revert to what he knows how to do, and that's run the ball. I like Flacco to have a good year. I don't think Locke is going to take his job this year. I think let me give you a caveat there. If Flacco gets injured, I think Locke can come in and take the job, but I don't think Locke is ready to play in the NFL this year really any more than Lamar Jackson was last year. Locke has to settle in. He has accuracy issues of his own he's going to need to work on. But I think if Flacco stays healthy all year, doesn't have the back issues reoccur, then he's got some weapons there in Sutton and Hamilton. I don't expect anything out of Emmanuel Sanders this year, but they've got Tim Patrick, who looked really good at the end of the year in the third wide receiver slot. The rookie, Juwan Winfrey, has a really good story and seems to be a really hard worker. And then they've got the running game with Lindsey and Freeman. And then tight end. they're one of the deepest teams at tight end if they can just get any of them to stay healthy. Fant, I think, is going to struggle with rookie tight end issues, and part of it that he's not a great blocker yet. But if they can keep Hireman or Fumagalli or Jake Butt, any of those Big Ten tight ends healthy, then that's really going to help Flacco out too. I think some of his loves the tight end is a bit overstated, but Hamilton and Sutton are two excellent wide receivers that could really, they can encompass the short and long game, and give Flacco a lot of options there. So for me, I feel like Flacco is going to have close to the number of fantasy points as Jackson, but he's going to have a much more consistent year. So I'm probably more inclined to take Flacco because when we had Bob Lung on, we talked a lot about consistency. So I think Jackson's going to be, 32 points one game and 9 points the next, whereas Flacco's going to be one of those 22, 18, 22, 17, 27, 19 kind of seasons. And Jackson's going to be way up and down. So I think Jackson ends up in the end with more points, but I think Flacco scoring wins you more games.
The consistency argument is a great one, and that kind of sways me a little bit.
Thanks, Bob.
For me, I think I would go Flacco too, although everybody knows I'm a noted Lamar Jackson hater. The one thing that does worry me about Flacco is I do kind of agree with Kyle. I would not be surprised if Drew Lock ends up becoming the starter, not necessarily based on injury, but if the Broncos fall out of playoff contention and then they put Lock in there to see what they have. So that does worry me a little bit about Flacco later on down the year, but if you think that might happen, best ball, you're going to have to grab Drew Lock, but if any kind of redraft league or anything like that, you likely can pick up Drew Lock off the waivers before that happens. Speaking of quarterbacks that could be replaced, we've got another battle here between two that likely could both be replaced by rookies, possibly at the beginning of the year or at least some point in time if they're eliminated from playoff contention. Joe Flacco back in this discussion again with an ADP of 210 against Case Keenum, who is now in Washington, was shipped out from Denver last year with an ADP of 268. Who do you got?
So we've already touched on Flacco, so I'll just jump straight to Keenum here and say that I do not believe he will even start a single game this season. I think that Dwayne Haskins will start from the get-go. The Washington Redskins are such a bottom-of-the-barrel team. I mean, what do they have to lose here? Get the big kid out there, let him play. Let him play with the rookie wide receivers. Let him get out there and get acquainted with these guys. And I just don't see a reason for them to even play Keenum right now. I mean, there's a good reason for him to be on the team as a mentor and as a good backup. I mean, he's been a good backup most of his playing time, and I just don't see why they would even bother. I mean, if they get to the playoffs this year, they'll be lucky. I see them winning 4 to 6 games. If that's the case, then why not throw your guy out there and let him get warmed up and let him get accustomed to the league. So yeah, that's a long way of saying that I think that Flacco will outscore Keenum.
All right, yeah, Brandon, I agree with you here. I'm looking at these two quarterbacks, and I am very uninspired, so I immediately look at their backups. You see Haskins taken 15th overall, Lock later in the draft, second round, and I agree. I don't think Keenum even starts week 1. I think if Haskins stays healthy, I don't think Keenum starts any games. But if I'm looking at Flacco versus Lock, I'm thinking Flacco probably makes it halfway through the season before he gets replaced. So, unfortunately, by default, I'm going Flacco, but I'm not inspired by either of these quarterbacks.
So, the argument for Keenum comes down to that age-old situation where the veteran coach looks around and says, I need to win as many games possible to save my job. What is gonna help me do that? And they go, it's not the rookie that's gonna help me do that. It's gonna be the veteran game manager. And so that's where I can see Keenum getting in the game, being the starter for way more games than he should be. I 100% believe it should be Haskins, but he's going to have to go in and he's going to have to substantially outperform Keenum as a rookie, because there's going to be the veteran is going to give us the best chance to win. One of the other situations they have going on in Washington is with their left tackle, who has basically said, you guys have not been loyal to me. You put me in a bad situation with my injury, and I am not going to play for you anymore. And they don't really have another option. In that case, I can also see, well, let's put the veteran out there until we can figure out this offensive line and let it gel some. It could go, if it comes down to Flacco or Keenum, I'm going to take Flacco, because in the previous argument, I don't think Flacco is going to be that far off of Jackson if he plays all 16 games. So it's pretty comfortably Flacco over Keenum, but I could see Keenum getting substantial playing time.
So if you guys are all going Flacco, would it change your guys' mind if it was Flacco versus Haskins?
That would change my mind.
Yeah, I would probably take Haskins.
Dennis, would you take Haskins as well?
Yeah, I don't know if I would, because of homerism. I definitely think, like any rookie quarterback, he's going to have some struggles this year. I think Jay Gruden is kind of an overrated coach. He had the reputation as a quarterback whisperer coming out of Cincinnati, and I don't think he's really done anything to support that reputation. But I also don't think Daniel Snyder has really done anything to give him the tools to work with either. So there's certainly been issues. He's had a good player here and there, but there's definitely been, personnel issues in Washington, and a lot of them are brought on by Daniel Snyder. So I think Flacco versus Haskins, both of them playing 16 games next year. I would probably say Flacco just ekes out the fantasy points over Haskins.
All right, then the last QB battle we have here is one that's going on in Tennessee, just to kind of get your guys' opinion on who you think is going to have the better year. Marcus Mariota with an ADP of 181, or Ryan Tannehill with an ADP of 278.
Well, I'm going to break from the norm a little bit here, and I'm going to go with Ryan Tannehill. I do my best to never listen to OTA blurbs, unless those blurbs are negative. When I hear negative news coming out of these practices, which are known to be the easy mode, so to speak, that's really concerning. We've heard lots of things about Marcus's passing game. It just looks like crap right now, and that doesn't make any sense to me. It tells me that he's either hurt still, or he's just not a good quarterback. We know that Ryan Tannehill can be a serviceable quarterback with weapons like Corey Davis, A.J. Brown, Walker when he comes back, a solid run game with Derrick Henry. I think that Tannehill can definitely hang in there as a mid-range quarterback too. This is all predicated, obviously on the fact that Mariota does not start for whatever reason. But I believe that if I had to guess, I'd say that's over a 50% chance, judging by what we saw last year and what we're seeing early this year. So I'm going to go with Tannehill here.
This is another uninspiring quarterback situation, but I'm going to go with Mariota barely. And it's not because I think Mariota's the better quarterback necessarily, and I've been reading the reports too coming out of OTAs, and they are ugly. But after this season, Mariota's more than likely gone. I doubt they re-sign him, but I have a feeling that they're going to give him every opportunity to show that he's not what they think he can be. And just based on that alone, I feel like he's going to get more starts than Tannehill. So by default, I guess again, 2019, I'll take Mariota for more points than Tannehill, but I would not be surprised at all if Mariota, tweaks something or messes up his nerve again week 1 and Tannehill starts from the second half of week 1 to week 16. So for this one, I'm going to lean Mariota just because of his free agent status after this season, just so Tennessee can get one final look at what they have.
Well, I think both quarterbacks come in at a fairly even playing field, since this will be another new offensive coordinator for Mariota. I think that they want Mariota to be the guy. Tannehill makes perfect sense as somebody who's looking to for an opportunity to go take a job. I agree with Brandon, though. I think the injury to Mariota hasn't healed like they thought it would. Maybe he's got the feeling back, but he doesn't have the strength back, and he can't. He's having trouble making the throws. So this might be a situation where they give Mariota the shot out of loyalty, and he can't perform, and then Tannehill takes over, and Mariota rides off into the sunset. I kind of think back. Mariota has never struck me. His personality, in interviews and stuff, he has never come off as one of those guys that is just super passionate about the game. He's always struck me as somebody who's a hard worker, and he plays the game the right way, but his passion, the fire isn't there. And I don't think that makes him a bad person or anything. I'm not comparing him to, the likes of Jamarcus Russell or anything, because I do think he tries to do the right thing. He's been beat up his whole career. He's struggled with injuries, and I think it's kind of taken its toll on him, and I think he's ready to, he's going to give it a shot and see what happens. But if this injury doesn't bounce back, I think as far as who's going to score the most points, it's a coin flip because there's so many variables. I think Tannehill has the chance to be the healthier of the two, so I'm going to give it to Tannehill.
We're leading different lives. It's like you're standing on the dock and I'm in the lake.
Sarah, I swear to God, I'll jump in the lake like a merman.
Running backs. So this one, I think there's quite a few interesting little battles we have here. I'm really interested to see which way you guys go with this. The first one is probably the most notable one, and we saw Le'Veon Bell sit out the entire year last year for Pittsburgh because he wanted to get paid, and James Conner stepped up and actually played fairly well. While he didn't put up necessarily Le'Veon Bell numbers, he represented himself well enough to win that starting job. Le'Veon Bell, now with Kyle's New York Jets, hoping to have a huge year's current ADP at 8 with James Conner at ADP of 12. Who you guys taking to have the better 2019 season?
Well, there are so many unknowns here between both of these players. Bell moving to a new team. He's obviously got he's kind of a head case. Let's just lay it out there. When he shows up to practice, you feel thankful if you have him on your fantasy teams because you just never know, And will Gase be okay with Bell, as a person, or will he do the psychopath Gase thing and bench Bell and put Powell in? Who knows? Connor, I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are taking a hit to the passing game, losing Brown. And I think that may actually affect the run game in a negative way. I think without the threat of Brown, teams will be able to focus on the running game a little more. I mean, obviously Juju is a great player, but we have yet to see what else is going to happen there with that team as far as James Washington and Deontay Johnson. We just don't know what's going to happen there. So I'm going to boil this down, and I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to take Le'Veon Bell here simply based on talent, based on the fact that I believe the Jets will run the offense through him, and I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm taking Bell also because I'm looking at Connor's situation. I'm seeing that Jalen Samuels is getting a lot of hype as someone that should get more touches in that backfield, catch more passes. They draft Benny Snell, not necessarily too late in the draft, and he does a lot of things that I think James Conner does very well also. Conner was one of my comps for Snell coming out. And then I look at Bell, and as a Jets fan, I know how much Sam Darnold loves that little dump-off pass. I think Bell is immediately the best pass catcher, receiver, whatever you want to call it in that offense. And I think from day one of OTAs, week one, I think Le'Veon is going to be Sam Darnold's best friend. I think Le'Veon's going to be an absolute monster in PPR, while I think Connor's going to lose a lot of work in the passing game to Jalen Samuels. Even though Antonio Brown has his, I think, 168 or so targets vacated from last season, I agree with what Brandon said about defenses being able to kind of zone in on the run a little more. I think for 2019 and in the near future, this is Bell all the way.
So choosing Bell seems to be the easiest way to go, but I feel like we're in for Le'Veon Bell hamstring season. I think that he hasn't played for a year. He hasn't always been in the best condition, and while he's an immensely talented player, after being off that long, you can kind of overdo it. I think I feel like they'll pace him a little bit in training camp, and then when it comes time to turn it on, he's going to tweak that hamstring, and it's going to lead to him missing some time. It'll linger throughout the season. I think I don't have a ton of faith about players, and while it only feels anecdotal, I don't have hard data. I guess I'll have to talk to Matthew Betts to see for sure. But I feel like players who take a season off frequently come back the following season and end up with a soft tissue injury. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with Conner. I feel like Conner is going to have some regression from last year. But I do think they're gonna get Conner the ball plenty to keep him around that low RB1, high RB2 category.
Next up, we have what was sort of a committee, well, not even really a committee in Kansas City last year. We saw everything that happened with Kareem Hunt off the field that got him cut. He ended up in Cleveland. His current ADP is 98. Obviously, we'll be sitting out the first 8 games, but then we'll be joining Nick Chubb on a very good Browns team at the moment. With Damian Williams, who kind of took over that role there after Spencer Ware got hurt, his ADP is 30, many believing, or at least the Chiefs are coming out and saying that he will be the lead back, but obviously vying with Carlos Hyde and Darwin Thompson as well. Who do you think has the better 2019 season?
I think the better 2019 season is going to be Damian Williams, simply based on the fact that, he's going to have an 8-game head start on Hunt. I think that Hunt is a good running back, but on top of what I just mentioned, Hunt is going to be sharing a backfield with Nick Chubb, and we all know and love Chubb. And I think Damian Williams is a really good running back. I mean, he got the short end of the stick with the Dolphins for many years. I think this is his 6th year in the league. Who knows what the deal was there? Dolphin's going to dolphin. So when he got shipped over to the Chiefs, and what a great offense, what a great team for a running back like him to land on. He finally got to show what he had, I think, in the full aspect of what he could do. And he did, and it may have been a case of his fresh legs against opposing defenses being worn down throughout an entire season. But we'll see come the beginning of this season. But regardless of that, I do believe that Damian Williams will outscore Hunt.
Yeah, if we're looking at the running back situations, you've got Damian Williams, who's currently the short-term starting running back in the best offense in the league. I don't necessarily think he's a long-term option there, but that's another conversation. And then you're looking at Kareem Hunt, and he's suspended his 8 games, and then he comes back, and he's immediately behind Nick Chubb. It'll probably take him a few games to even get 30% of the workload for the Browns, whatever he'll end up getting at week 10, 11 at that point in the season. So if we're just looking strictly at 2019, I think you got to go Damian Williams here. I don't even think he's much better than Carlos Hyde. I don't even think he's necessarily too much better than guys like Darwin Thompson. But purely based on opportunity, I think it's got to be Williams, even though I think Hunt is the more talented back. The 8-game suspension combined with sitting behind Nick Chubb when he gets back, I can't lean Hunt in this situation.
Yeah, I definitely think that Williams is going to rack up more fantasy points as the support back to Carlos Hyde than Nick Chubb is going to get next year. I think Williams is who he is, and he's a third down spot duty back. He was forced into playing last season after Hunt went out, and he performed pretty well given the parts that were around him. He was able to fulfill that role. I don't know if Darwin Thompson is going to push him out of the way, but I do know that Carlos Hyde, for all the flack he gets, is a solid running back. He doesn't make mistakes. He's a capable pass catcher, and he's a powerful runner. He's a good running back, and I think he's going to lead the team in carries next year. Yeah, it's great. You want to talk about Damian Williams, but he couldn't beat out Lamar Miller or Kenyon Drake in Miami. And I'm not sold on him. I'd love to sell him. I have a share or two of him, and I just can't find that person that believes in him. But Chubb is going to come back to a situation Hunt is going to come back to a situation where the only way he's going to get significant playing time is if the Browns are out of playoff contention and they want to showcase him to try and trade him, or if Chubb gets injured, because Nick Chubb is a hell of a running back. And while Hunt is a hell of a running back also, I don't think there's going to be – you're not going to run Nick Chubb 22 times a game for, I'm going to say 10 weeks, because it'll take that long after he's activated for him to get back on the field. You're not going to hand the ball off to Nick Chubb for 22 times a game and then all of a sudden cut him back to 12 or 14 because you've got Kareem Hunt coming in, especially if you're winning. So Nick Chubb is going to have a great season next year. Carlos Hyde will be the second scorer here, and then Damian Williams. Williams might catch 45 passes next year, maybe 50 even. He could be Nyheim Hines for all I mean, when I look at his pass catching numbers, that's one thing he has been consistent at in his career is catching the ball.
The next battle, I think, might be a little bit more interesting just based on where the other back went because he thrived with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. Tevin Coleman goes and joins the San Francisco 49ers in free agency, has a current ADP of 67, while Devonta Freeman, who is going to be the lead back in Atlanta, has an ADP of 37. Who has a better 2019 season?
I think this is a landslide. Give me Freeman all day, every day. I want nothing to do with Coleman. I want nothing to do with the San Francisco backfield in general. I don't care about his history with Shanahan. That backfield is going to be a complete nightmare, and I'm going to be living that nightmare every Sunday because of the amount of Jerick McKinnon shares I have. I go to sleep at night thinking about it, dreading it. Nobody will take any of those shares off my hands. This is my life. So give me Devonta Freeman every day. They've bolstered the offensive line. It appears that he's back healthy this year. I can't think of a reason not to go with Freeman here, really. So,
see, I hate to practically mirror almost everything that Brandon's saying, but I also don't, because he's making some good points. I don't like anything about the 49ers backfield, and that's mostly because I like all of the running backs in the 49ers backfield, if that makes any sense. I like Breida, I like Coleman, I like McKinnon, but I'd like them all if they were starters on their own individual teams. I hate them when they're all in the same backfield because no one's going to be able to separate themselves from the pack. So I'm going to take Freeman, even though I like Ito Smith. I don't think he's more than just a situational running back. If Freeman can stay healthy, I think he will significantly outperform Coleman unless there's some horrible disease outbreak in San Francisco and McKinnon and Breida both go down. So I'm going to take Freeman pretty easily.
Yeah, I think the back to own in San Francisco is Matt Breida.
Yeah.
So, Coleman has shown that he needs to have a big, wide open hole because he doesn't have terrific vision. And, he's a capable pass catcher. And as long as Freeman stays healthy, I think he's going to be in for a good year. I don't think Ito Smith is, calling him a situational player is probably the best compliment you could give him. I'm all aboard the Quadri Allison train. I think Allison is going to supplant Smith as that second back. But I do think that Freeman probably gets somewhere in the range of 60 to 65% of the running back touches in Atlanta if he stays healthy. And, that's good enough to put up 1,000 yards on the ground. So it's pretty handily Freeman.
The Saints let Mark Ingram walk because of what they have in Alvin Kamara. They did bring in Latavius Murray, which might have been the better battle here, so that's actually what I'm going to do. Because we know Alvin Kamara is going to be the back to own in New Orleans. He's their all-purpose back. He will be a stud. Mark Ingram, ADP at 41. I will find Latavius Murray's, but who has a better year in 2019, Mark Ingram or Latavius Murray or Alvin Kamara? We'll throw both of them in there for the Saints.
Oh man, you're throwing me a curveball. I was all primed for the change up right down the middle. You know what? I really like Latavius Murray, especially going to the Saints. I think that his athleticism and his overall skill as a running back has been discounted for a long time. He's a good player. Ingram going to the Ravens. Here's what concerns me about that. I think that defenses are not going to respect the pass from Jackson. And I know you can't stack the box against a running quarterback with speed like Jackson's, but I think that at the very least you can hang linebackers in that middle of the field zone and just kind of wait and see what happens. I don't think that I'm just worried that the Ravens' running game is not going to be as strong as people think it will. I'm worried that teams will be able to play minimal man coverage against them just because they don't respect Jackson's passing at all. That being said, I do think that Ingram is a more well-rounded player. He's going to be the starter there. Obviously, Murray is going to be sharing a field with Alvin Kamara, a great player, an explosive player. So I'm going to go Ingram here, but it's not without some hesitation.
All right, Brandon, you need to take a step back because you are taking all of my good points.
Okay, fuckface. First, take a big step back.
Shut your mouth.
But I'm looking at this and I'm basically agreeing with you. I see Mark Ingram in a starting role, and I think that with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I think that is going to open up some rushing lanes for Mark Ingram, even though defenses will not necessarily respect the pass. I still think they'll respect Lamar Jackson's legs. However, if I'm looking at relative cost, I want Latavius Murray over Mark Ingram. And the three of you guys also being Dynasty Nerds writers, my most recent article was about how to find, the cheapest possible high upside running backs, and I highlighted three guys being Alex Madison, actually 4 guys: Alexander Madison, Damian Harris, Darrell Henderson, and then Latavius Murray being the 4th. When I'm looking at guys like that, I'm looking for running backs that are behind solidified studs who were given, I guess you could say, just big, long contracts, 3 years, 4 years, hopefully $3 to $4 million a year. And I'm looking at Latavius's contract. You got a 4-year, $14.4 million deal. I mean, that is a commitment. The Saints front office is basically saying, okay, if Alvin Kamara goes down, Latavius Murray is our guy. Like, we're paying him almost $4 million a year to take over that starting role if Kamara goes down. So, if I just had to pick who's going to have the better 2019, give me Mark Ingram, obviously, because he's the starter. But if we're going based off relative cost or ADP, I'm going to take Latavius Murray because, God forbid, if Kamara does go down, he's going to get workhorse touches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree that if Kamara goes down, Murray gets the touches. I think that the Saints are going to pass a little more this year than they did last year. Which is going to limit some of those extra touches, because I think they know after watching Kamara for the first few games last year, they don't want him carrying the ball 20-plus times a game. They don't mind him getting 20 touches, but they're looking more at the 12 carries, 8 receptions kind of 20 touches. So Murray is going to get some carries. Though I wish I could remember, it was just 3 days ago I saw on Twitter, somebody posted the number of carries inside like the 5-yard line or 10-yard line last year. And Kamara was like in the top 5. So they're not afraid to let him carry the ball down at the goal line. But when it comes to, if we're doing Murray versus Ingram, for me it's comfortably Ingram. I think that the rush lanes will be there, and nobody really is expecting anybody in Baltimore to break 20, 30, 50-yard runs. It's going to be 7 yards a pop. Well, if you do that twice, you've got a first down. And so Ingram is built for that kind of game. If you look at last season, Gus Edwards from week 11 through week 16 in a limited role, as in not catching any passes because he can't, was RB18 during those weeks. And I think Ingram can easily surpass that. I don't think that Murray can compete with that. I think Murray is at best a high-end running back 3 with touchdown upside that could potentially get him up into the low to mid running back 2s. So I feel like Ingram's floor is Murray's ceiling. And so that gives me Ingram all the way.
The next battle is 2 running backs that I think could have very interesting seasons with David Montgomery and Jordan Howard. So David Montgomery's current ADP, 64, really just sharing that he is sharing the Chicago backfield with Mike Davis. Many believe Mike Davis might have a role, might not. And Tariq Cohen, who we saw at times was very explosive. Jordan Howard with an ADP of 77 there in Philadelphia with, again, a backfield by committee, as we talked about earlier in the Carson Wentz and Nick Foles argument. However, Miles Sanders already dealing with an injury, has not even practiced at camp yet. Who knows what they will do. The Eagles coaches have come out and said that it will be a running back by committee. Who do you guys have with the better 2019 season?
Hey, Kyle, I'm going to pass this one to you, and I'm going to let you get your points in there first, buddy.
Oh, I was just joking. You don't have to do that.
No, but David is your guy, so come on, do it.
Okay, that's true. I'll give you that one. All right, thank you.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
David Montgomery, I guess you could say before the NFL draft, he was my 1.02 behind N'Keal Harry, my number 1 running back in the class. I love his contact balance. I love his vision. I think he's underrated as a pass catcher. And for a bigger guy, he has some crazy acceleration. And then you go look at Jordan Howard, and he doesn't really do any of those things well that I just listed. Despite the fact that Sanders is struggling with the hammy injury, it doesn't change the fact that he'll probably be a full go by week 1. And even if the Eagles' backfield is a committee, Howard's probably not maxing out at more than 12 to 15 carries per game. I look at Montgomery's situation and I see that he's the more talented back, and that Bears defense, I mean, they're going to be up a lot. That's going to lead to a lot of just gritty rushing yards by David Montgomery. I mean, 3rd and 3, hand Montgomery the ball. 4th and 1 at the 1 yard line, you're handing Montgomery the ball. I think Cohen's definitely going to get some run in the passing game, but I really do like Montgomery as maybe like a 15 to 17 carry per game back, and toss a few catches in there because Cohen can't catch them all out of the backfield.
Yeah, I mean, I would. I'm definitely going to agree with that here. I think that Jordan Howard, he's going to morph into more of a situational running back as the season goes on. He's going to be as they work Miles Sanders in more and more. Miles Sanders is going to be the obvious number one on that team. Jordan Howard is going to be pushed into short yardage, goal line, spelling Miles Sanders, yada, yada, yada. And I think that David Montgomery, although I do worry about sharing with Tariq Cohen, who is obviously an explosive player, I think that David Montgomery is going to be the number one out of the gate. I think that team is going to lean on the run, probably more so than the Eagles will. Maybe not by much, but I don't necessarily have as much faith in little Mitchell to rack up the passing yards as I do Wentz. So yeah, I think this is pretty easily David Montgomery. Jordan Howard will see his role decrease as the season goes on.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, how you see it, how it's going to play out. I think Howard does have a fairly prominent role to start the year. He's a veteran. He's very solid in the running game. He can do a lot of good things. Catching the ball just isn't in his bag. I think Sanders is going to have to come in and show that he can hold on to the ball. He's got a little bit of a fumble reputation, but he's very dynamic. And I think Montgomery is going to end up the starter, like Brandon was saying. And Montgomery is a good pass catcher. It'll be interesting to watch how Nagy uses the running backs in Chicago, because Davis did show himself to be a pretty good back, and Cohen definitely has he's like Liam Neeson. He has a very particular skill set.
I do have a very particular set of skills I've acquired over a very long career, skills that make me a nightmare for people like you.
And when he puts it in play, it's hard to stop. So, I think I did hear they're going to be using Cohen a lot more on returns and stuff to get him touches in that way. So that could open up a little bit. I think it's Montgomery. I don't know if he'll outperform his ADP of 64. He is a rookie, and that's asking a lot. But he's also playing most fantasy-friendly position for a rookie, so there's that too.
Before we move on to the next battle, number one, Kyle, the only mistake you made with your argument there is that David Montgomery should have been ahead of N'Keal Harry. And Brandon, do not disrespect Mitchapalooza on this podcast. I do not appreciate it. I know you're a Packers fan.
Oh, boy.
I know you're a Packers fan.
Oh, boy.
Do not disrespect Mitchapalooza.
Little Mitchell.
All right. This next one, not necessarily looking more for, I guess if you guys really want to break it down, you can. I just kind of want to get your thoughts. I think this is actually a real battle here. These next two are ones that are not jilted lovers or anything like that. It's just more battles going on right now. My guy, Ronald Jones, with an ADP of 93 versus Peyton Barber with an ADP of 139 in that Tampa Bay backfield. Who do you guys got?
Well, now that Ronald Jones has become what some folks call a post-hype sleeper, I don't mind. I really want to go with Rojo here, but I don't think I can.
What the fuck happened?
it's still got to be Peyton Barber here. Peyton Barber is, I mean, he's just a pro. You know, he doesn't necessarily do anything special, but there's one thing that he does, and that's not get knocked down by a blade of grass that's a little longer than all the rest of them, which Ronald Jones does. Ronald Jones his contact balance is awful. For whatever reason, he's not a pass catcher. I mean, when you look at his profile, you would think he's built to be a pass catcher. He just never was. And with Arians there, I think that they're going to throw the ball a decent amount. You know, there's different stats out there that say that might not be the case, but I think that Peyton Barber is just a solid guy. He's going to give them what they want. He's got some pass catching ability. He can handle the run game. I've still got to go Barber. I would love to go Rojo here, but I've still got to go Barber.
Okay, so if I'm looking at these two players, looking at Ronald Jones coming out last year, see, I don't consider myself an above-average scout or a talent evaluator by any means, but looking at Jones coming out of USC, he has a skinny frame, so he has trouble running between the tackles. Like Brandon said, his contact balance is absolutely horrible. So you think to yourself, you're like, okay, maybe he's not a fantastic between the tackles runner because, you know, contact balance, a bit of a thinner frame, but he must be fantastic at catching the ball in the open field, right?
Yes,
no, actually, he's not.
No, he is.
Wait, what were you saying, Matt?
No, hey, Kyle, we lost you. We lost you, Kyle. You still there?
I knew I'd get something. I didn't think you'd even let me go that long. But
the blatant disrespect is ridiculous.
I mean, I'm looking at Jones's profile. The fact that he went before Darius Geis in the NFL draft still leaves me legitimately disgusted. But then if we're going over, right? But then we're looking over at Peyton Barber here. Last season, he wasn't spectacular by any means, but he quietly had just under 1,000 yards from scrimmage and 6 touchdowns. I mean, that's not too bad compared to Ronald Jones's 0.7 yards per carry last year. Sorry, Matt.
You happy? Fatty make a funny.
That's all right. That's right.
I mean,
I'll back that stat up in a minute, but continue.
I mean, if we're looking at Tampa Bay, realistically, they're probably going to draft a running back day 1 or day 2 of the 2020 draft. But if we're looking just 2019, I'm going to take Barber just because I don't believe in Jones's talent, and I don't necessarily believe in Barber's either, but he was moderately impressive last year. That offense should be a little better with Bruce Arians, there, and 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Even if that's his ceiling, probably not too bad compared to Jones. So I'll take Barber here.
Hey, Kyle, was it you that posted the Lamar Miller's yards from scrimmage today?
That was me.
Yeah. So, Peyton Barber is no Lamar Miller. I wanted Peyton Barber to be a thing, but I don't know what their plan is this year for running back in Tampa, because I don't think Barber is the solution, and I definitely don't think Ronald Jones is the solution. They brought in Bruce Anderson as a free agent, but even then, it's I don't know. It's they are they going to trade for somebody? If not, then they may throw the ball 700 times this year.
Ooh, that would be sweet.
So it's and they have the players. I mean, between Howard and Brate and Evans and Watson and Godwin, they can throw the hell out of the ball, and it just their running back situation. It isn't an either or; it's a neither. And if I'm forced to take one, I'm not taking Jones. That's for goddamn sure.
Got to get the cheaper guy, though, right?
No, you don't. I tell my kids all the time, the best value is not always the cheapest price.
Oh, well, Barber is definitely cheaper, though, right?
I don't think he's cheaper than Rojo, is he? I guess I'm not looking at the sheet. If he is, that's just ludicrous.
Yes, he's close to 40 spots behind him.
Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So drafters are drunk.
It's all of the preseason hype on Rojo. He's getting all the camp time.
It's not post-hype sleeper. It's post-sleep hyper.
Oh, man, I can't find... go ahead, Kyle. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hate to butt in right here, but, when I made the 0.7 yards per carry joke, I was, just joking around. So then I look it up. I mean, this dude had 23 carries for 44 yards last year. I wasn't even that far off.
No, you weren't.
Yeah, I mean, Barber's the guy that I'm going to take in this backfield, but it's going to be at gunpoint. I'm not, I'm going to take Dylan Cantrell or, John Ross maybe.
Bruce Anderson.
Yeah.
I like Bruce Anderson.
Yeah,
Me too.
all the reports on him are good, but when you look at his stats and you kind of look at what little film you can find, there's, I don't want to say, the numbers were a little underwhelming. He didn't, for all the talk about him being a great pass catcher, he didn't catch that many passes in college. But that doesn't mean he's not good at it by any stretch.
Right.
We'll see. He wasn't good enough to get drafted. And that could be just the general devaluation of running backs. That could be, he's going to have to go in and fight his way up.
That's true.
All right, I've been trying to find this Ronald Jones stat here, but I can't find what I did with it. But he was hit in the backfield more often than any other running back. Now, he probably did fumble it, but that's all right. I know you guys are going to say that he sucks, but he's going to break out this year. And when he does, I am going to rub it in all of your faces.
He's going to have 39 carries for 87 yards.
Better than what he did this year, and that's all that matters, so you can consider it a breakout year. So I will win that argument. All right, the next battle, that matters, sort of. And this is not for 2019. I do want to preface it as your career. I know there's a lot you have to factor into that. But going forward, who would you rather have for your running back of your dynasty team? Miles Sanders with an ADP of 79 or Josh Jacobs with an ADP of 46?
Well, Miles Sanders is my 2019 101. So that's pretty simple for me to go ahead and say Miles Sanders. I think Josh Jacobs lands on a team where is ripe. He will be the lead back starting week 1. What that means exactly, we're not sure yet. That will play out as the season unfolds. But give me the talent of Miles Sanders, the dynamism of Miles Sanders, the well-roundedness of Miles Sanders. I think that it's telling that he sat behind Saquon Barkley at Penn State. Never got to see the field much during that time. I think that Miles Sanders' ceiling could be 75% of Barkley, and I'm all in on that.
See, from a dynasty perspective, I don't really like either of these players, so I don't really see any instance where either of these players would be on my dynasty team. We'll start with Sanders first. Again, you can't complain about Sanders not producing earlier in his collegiate career, obviously, because he sat behind Barkley. When given the opportunity to start, he ran away with it. He looked fantastic. He was a little questionable on film to me. I didn't love his contact balance, and that's the number one trait I'm looking for when scouting a running back. Then looking over at Josh Jacobs, first-round draft capital, landed in that gritty offense that's going to give him 250-plus touches in a season, 300-plus touches. But he has the horrible, gross combination of lack of production in college and lack of athleticism. And while just over 80% of running backs who are drafted in the first round have 1,000-yard rushing seasons throughout their career. I don't love Jacobs from a long-term perspective just for those reasons listed earlier. If I had to pick one, I'm taking Jacobs, but I'm not happy about it. I'm selling both of them at their current cost, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say I wouldn't have either one of these players, but generally, if I'm drafting them and it's in a rookie draft, it's probably they've fallen to the 106 or 107, and that's not happening. So, I'm not drafting them. Jacobs, it's troubling to me that he couldn't beat out Damian Harris, and people, the argument against it is like, oh, Saban uses a stable of backs, and my reply is, yeah, but Damian Harris rushed for over 1,000 yards twice. Well, Josh Jacobs was a 3-star, and he had to work, but he didn't. So, Damian Harris is not Saquon Barkley. And so I give Sanders more of a pass, not getting more playing time behind Barkley. And whether that's a BS argument or not, I don't know, but that's how I feel about it. And at their values, at their ADPs, it's going to be Sanders easily, but I think Sanders is, I don't want to say he's falling into a committee situation, but he's definitely going to have to prove himself because the Eagles do have a solid running back in Jordan Howard, and Jacobs is going into a situation where if the Raiders fall behind, they know Jalen Richard is going to produce in the running game. Jacobs is going to have to be able to outproduce him. Doug Martin is, at this stage of his career, I was going to be mean and say Damian Harris, but that's not fair. Doug Martin he's just a guy. I still like Chris Warren's talent. I definitely think that Josh Jacobs is going to get every opportunity in Oakland, but he's too expensive for my taste here, so I'd take Sanders.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
So, wait, what are you guys doing in August? Because I know what I'm doing.
Ooh.
The Fantasy Football Roundtable, we're going to be at the Midwest Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio on Sunday, August 28th from 12 to 6 p.m. We're going to have a booth at the expo. It's at the Canton Cultural Arts Center. So if you've never been to the Hall of Fame, that's a great weekend to come up. You can go to the Hall of Fame on Saturday, to the expo on Sunday. There's going to be tons of fantasy football experts with booths, podcasts going on live, different things going on, strategy talks. You'll be able to meet a whole bunch of people. It's in Canton, like I said. You can register at www.midwestffexpo.com, and if you enter code KNIGHTS, KNIGHTS, like our listener league, the Knights of the Round Table, you can get $5 off your admission.
Yeah, we're excited to be there. We'll have a booth there. Both of us will be there. We'll be able to talk to you guys. We'll also have a bunch of free swag that I cannot wait to post up on Twitter here soon once I get it to give away to listeners, and you guys can get yourself some as well if you're there at the expo. So let's move on to the wide receivers.
I think we should stop seeing each other.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Did you say why?
I mean, this thing, what are we doing? I mean, is this normal?
We've got a bunch of really good battles here, too. The first one I feel like is probably more of a landslide, but technically both these guys are now the ones on their teams. Odell gets shipped out of New York and joins the Cleveland Browns with an ADP of 11, while Sterling Shepard, who is technically the most tenured wide receiver there now and likely going to be the number one, although I do think he'll be vying with Golden Tate for that spot with an ADP of 80, who has the better year.
I think this is a landslide, and Beckham's favor for sure. But what I will say is that I believe that Shepard is going to have a really nice year coming up. How nice that is depends on the quarterback play. Can it get any worse than Manning from last season? I'm not sure. Can Manning get worse, or can he at least stay the same? Will Daniel Jones come in? Who knows? But 2019 and moving forward, the answer here is Beckham Jr. But don't sleep on Shepard. He's going to have a nice year here.
Yeah, it's definitely Odell for me, too, in a landslide. But looking at Shepard and the Giants in general, everything I'm about to say is going under the assumption that Eli Manning will not be the starting quarterback there. I'm just going to base off Daniel Jones because I don't think anything is going to go well if Eli is the starting quarterback there. But if eventually Daniel Jones takes over this year, I like that for Shepard. I like that for Tate. I like it for Ingram, and I like it for Saquon. I think Daniel Jones is going to be a check-down machine in that offense, honestly, because he has no choice, because he's operating with a bunch of targets who are used to absurdly low average depth of target throughout their career. It's definitely Odell for me, but again, I agree with Brandon. I think Shepard's going to have a good year, and I think Tate's going to have a good year also.
It's not really a contest. You know, Shepard is Jarvis Landry to Golden Tate. I think Tate is still going to, I think, be the target leader. I think Shepard is going to not be far behind him. But OBJ is he's going to get a substantial amount of targets in Cleveland. At some point, there's going to be some point this year where we're going to be bitching about him forcing the ball to OBJ when Hollywood Higgins is wide open. I like, honestly, in New York, the guy that I'm buying there is Corey Coleman. I think he's going to slip into that third wide receiver job. And while everybody is so focused on they can't throw the ball, they only throw the ball short, he's going to have those Deshaun Jackson kind of games, 2 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown. So I'm kind of throwing my dart there. I like Shepard and Tate to both have good seasons. I don't think they're going to be wide receiver 1 level seasons. So in this comparison, or if who I'm taking here, it's certainly OBJ.
The next battle is one that not only happened on social media, but is now also happening on this podcast. Juju Smith-Schuster, a big fan favorite of a lot of people out there, with an ADP of 17 versus AB, the scorned lover there in Pittsburgh, who actually has an ADP of 19, which is very surprising to me that he's going ahead of AB with everything AB has done in his career. Who has the better 2019 season?
Give me Juju Smith-Schuster here, and moving forward, also. I think that the numbers for wide receivers moving teams and then carrying on the same level of success are out there for us to see, and they're not very good. Obviously, AB is an outlier. He's one of the best of all time. He's a great player. But at the same time, you have to take into account the downgrading quarterback from Roethlisberger to Derek Carr. You have to take into account the willingness of his new coach to throw the ball as much as Tomlin did. These are so many. There's so many unknowns moving forward with Brown. What I do know is that Juju is very young. He's explosive. He's got a quarterback that loves to throw the ball down the field, and he's the number 1 in that offense.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I'm taking Juju. Last year he had 166 targets, and Antonio Brown had 168. Those 168 targets of ABs are obviously going to be vacated, and the only other viable receiving options that Pittsburgh brought in this offseason are Deontay Johnson and Dante Moncrief. They are not reaching 168 targets combined, in my honest opinion. I think Juju is definitely going to take a nice little chip out of those. I agree with what Brandon said about AB switching teams. That's usually not a very smooth transition for wide receivers. So I'm taking Juju, who I think is just an absurd 22 years old or something crazy like that, I'm taking Juju 2019, and I'm taking him for years to come. I think he's going to be a stud for the next 7-8 years.
Yeah, that's pretty much a no-brainer. I think the question in Pittsburgh is how many of those targets will James Washington take? Because I agree, they're not going to Moncrief and Johnson, but I could see James Washington going from 38 targets to 75 targets. See Vance McDonald going from 72 to 100. So they can get pretty evenly distributed. Is Ben going to throw the ball 675 times again? Is probably the bigger question. So, that was 125 more pass attempts than Derek Carr had. So potentially I could see Ben coming down and Carr going up, so that might level out the attempts. But it ends up ultimately being, is AB going to be a big enough outlier in the whole change teams, change offenses history of the game to be able to do that? And ultimately, I don't think so. I think he's older, and you can't teach an old dog new tricks. He's going to do what he does, and he'll have some success. He isn't going to be as consistent, I think, as he once was. But he's still going to have a good season. Juju's just going to have a better one.
On an unrelated note, the St. Louis Blues are just kicking the crap out of the Boston Bruins, which is kind of interesting to see. But we'll move on. We are running a little short of time here, so I'm just going to hit these. There's 3 more battles that I'm really interested in getting your guys' opinion on that I'll hit before we close this out. And AB is in this one as well. He's replacing the wide receiver that they traded in midseason to the Dallas Cowboys, Amari Cooper, with an ADP of 29, or AB with an ADP of 19.
Give me Amari Cooper here. I know that he can tend to have a boom bust profile, but I think that he is the clear cut, without a doubt, number one passing option in that Dallas offense. And I'm not going to back off of the things I said about Brown earlier. I'm just really nervous about the transition to a new team. I'm nervous about the downgrading quarterback. Give me Amari, man. Give me.
Man, Brandon, I thought I was going to catch everyone off guard when I said that I wanted Amari also, but I guess that will not be happening.
Erroneous on both counts.
I am taking Amari also. I'm taking Amari in redraft. I'm taking him in Dynasty. I'm sticking to the brand here with my Amari love. I mean, looking at the numbers last year, he was traded to the Cowboys in the middle of a season. Usually when wide receivers go to new teams in free agency, when they have an entire offseason to learn the playbook, they still struggle. Amari Cooper was traded to the Cowboys halfway through the year, played 11 games, and if you extrapolate his 11-game stats into a 16-game pace, that would be 96 receptions for over 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was traded halfway through the season. I mean, that's absurd. They brought in only Randall Cobb to really compete for targets. I mean, I see no reason as to why Amari can't even improve on those numbers with an entire offseason to learn the playbook. This is Amari for me. I know that Matt's going to rip it apart. Matt, I'm sorry, my man, but I'm going Amari here, my boy.
I don't think it's really that big of a... It's not a controversy to go Amari over Antonio Brown. He's settling into his new team. He's got a year in the offense now to assimilate it. I think some of the issues with Amari last year was the inconsistency, the volatility, and that's been something that you have to learn to live with. It was that way in Oakland. I think he'll always have some of those games where he explodes or where he disappears. But that being said, I think he's ascending more so than Antonio Brown. And so he's the guy that I want to take in that situation.
Yes.
Love it.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
Alright, let's make some bad decisions here. So, we're not going to do it right now because we're running out of time and I don't want to waste people's time, but we're going to come up with a bet here because AB is going to smoke Amari Brickhand's ass this year in fantasy.
Boy. Oh, Lord Almighty.
Sucks! I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't know what you guys are smoking over there, wherever you guys are at, but Amari Cooper, he's good. He's good. I'll give you guys that. I've come around a little bit on that train. Amari Cooper is not a wide receiver 3. I'll give you guys that. But you know what Amari Cooper isn't? He's not a wide receiver 1 like Antonio Brown is. Amari Cooper is going to finish outside the top 12. He is not going to repeat what he did in Dallas last year. He's just not that good. Great, good for him. You can extrapolate the stats all you want on, if he was a better player, he'd have better stats too as well, Kyle. It doesn't matter what he did in the half season there with Dallas. Not going to happen. We'll figure it out in the chat. We'll come up with something, and we'll talk about it on the podcast next time we have you guys on, or we'll talk about the bet that I'm going to win against all three of you, because AB is going to win. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll grant you this. Amari Cooper is not the wide receiver 1 that Antonio Brown was. So Antonio Brown is heading for washed up.
You're right. I don't disagree with you on that, but we said the 2019 season. I'm not talking about what they're going to do in 2020. AB will have a better 2019 year than Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I don't know.
I do know. I have a crystal ball right here. I can see the future. I'm going to win everything
Matt,
next year. Go ahead. What's up, Kyle?
Sorry, before we move on, I got one question for you. Just because I like hearing, because Amari gets so much hate, I like hearing what other people have to say. I know if you're not a fan, but if you take those stats and you extrapolate them, the 96 receptions, 1,300 yard, 10 touchdown, if that's a 16 game pace, that would have placed him as wide receiver 10 overall last year.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that makes you so confident that he's going to do worse than he did this year, next year, with an entire offseason to learn the playbook? I'm just curious.
Dak Prescott sucks.
Hatred. That's what.
No, just Dak Prescott sucks. I'll just be honest. I do not think Dak Prescott is nearly as good as everybody else thinks he is. And I also think that, I don't know if this is going to make sense, but I also think that they were kind of able to surprise defenses with Amari Cooper being there. Nobody knew what they were going to kind of do. You also have a new offensive coordinator coming in there, and John Kitna, who's never even called to play before. Congratulations, you were a quarterback in the NFL, so you must know what you're doing. No, you don't. He's never been an offensive coordinator before. Jason Garrett's a fucking retard. Dak Prescott's not that good. The only thing they have going for them is Zeke Elliott. So yeah, when teams run up, or teams, flood the line and try and stop Zeke Elliott, Amari Cooper is gonna make a play here and there because he can't drop every pass thrown to him. But he's just not gonna have a better year than AB.
I can't wait.
I don't think Amari Cooper is a bad wide receiver. As I said, I made a bet. I was trying to give Cowboys fans that he would make top 12. And they didn't want that. They said he's gonna finish as a top 10 wide receiver this year. It's just not gonna happen. But AB will. I know Derek Carr is everybody wants to say Derek Carr sucks. Derek Carr is a lot better than we give him credit for. He also is now 2 years into John Gruden's system. AB is going to come in there. They're going to force feed him the ball. They were force feeding the ball to Jared Cook last year because they didn't have anybody else. AB is by far the best talent they have on that team, and we saw it in Pittsburgh. Even when you double cover him, triple cover him, AB is going to get the ball and he can do something with it when he gets it. So I trust AB over Amari Cooper. I will take Derek Carr over Dak Prescott. I know that might seem ludicrous to a lot of people, but the only thing Dak Prescott has over Derek Carr is the rushing ability. If you go back and look at what they do passing, Dak Prescott is not going to throw for 4,000 yards. He's come close, throw for 3,800. He's not going to throw for 4,000 yards, 4,200 yards even. I don't think he's capable of it. I don't think he has the capacity to do it, which he's going to have to do if Amari Cooper is going to be a top 12 wide receiver. But you know who can do that? Derek Carr can. So I'm going to take the wide receiver, and I'm going to take AB because he's just better. He is just better. I don't think that's an unfair statement to make. I don't think Amari Cooper sucks, but he's not AB. And I do think at least this year in 2019, AB is going to have a better year. I'm not saying that, in 2020, 2021, 2022, AB will, but in 2019, AB will be better than Amari Cooper.
All right, fair enough. I'm excited to split the winnings of our bet with Brandon and Dennis.
And I'm excited to again and rub that in all you guys' faces when it comes through. If not, I'll just deactivate my Twitter account because I don't need it anyways. All right.
Derek Carr threw for a grand total of 200 more yards than Dak Prescott last year.
But that was just last year. I mean, you go and look at their careers and see how much better Derek Carr has been than Dak Prescott. You can't.
Has he really?
Yes, he has. It was the first year in John Gruden's system, and they were both pissy with each other. They're like jilted ex-lovers with the way they acted toward each other, yelling at each other, wanting to look like they were kind of trying to kiss on the sidelines, but then they didn't know if they should. It was all kinds of weird shit going on in Oakland, all right?
What if I told you that last year Derek Carr set a career high in yardage?
Good for him. He'll be even better in 2019 then. 2 years in John Gruden's offense.
But Dak won't be better.
No. Has John Kitna ever called a play before in the NFL?
No, but he's the quarterback coach. Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator.
That's even worse. So there we go. Kellen Moore. Has Kellen Moore ever called a play in the NFL?
Last year he took over calling the plays.
Well, that's not great because Dallas Cowboys were not as good as everybody likes to think they were last year. Who's the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys? Is it still Jason Garrett?
Yeah.
He's still a retard.
But
so
what's John Gruden done the last 5 years? He
made a lot of money in the booth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, he got a $100 million contract for nothing. Not for nothing. They gave it to him for some reason.
John Gruden is going. He hopes to have as good a record as Jason Garrett did last year.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but it'll happen eventually. We'll see. I mean, there's no point in continuing. We won't be able to tell until the end of this year. But I know I'm going to be right. Again, I got the crystal ball right here. I sold my soul to Satan to figure out what's going to happen next year. I already know what's going to happen. So AB's going to have a better year. The last one, just because I want to see Brandon and Kyle go at it before we close it out here. N'Keal Harry with an ADP of 111 versus Paris Campbell with an ADP of 132. And I don't want to do 2019 season. I want to do the same thing we did with Sanders and Joshua Jacobs here. Overall career, who has the better career? Go.
Okay, here we go. As many of you know, I am in love with Paris Campbell, and I will ride this train into the sunset. Give me Paris Campbell every day. I think the NFL is changing right now, and it's shifting towards speed, it's shifting towards yak, it's shifting towards versatility. I think that Paris Campbell has all of these things in spades. Not only that, but he landed on the perfect team to take advantage of these things. I think that Paris Campbell is poised for possibly a 1,000-yard season this year. N'Keal Harry's situation makes me nervous. There's already been reports that he's struggling to separate in practice, easy mode, like I said earlier. This is going to be a problem with Tom Brady, who is notorious for having trust issues with guys, kind of like Rodgers in that sense. He's going to select his favorites, and he is going to stick with those guys. That's not to say that Harry can't develop that and build it and make it happen, but I see N'Keal Harry as an elite chain mover. I think that that's going to be his launching point for the majority of his career. He's going to be a red zone guy. He's going to be a chain mover, and on top of that, who knows how much longer Brady is going to be playing. I mean, we know that Luck is young. He's going to be playing for 8 to 10 more years, probably, if he can stay healthy. So for the career, give me the guy with the higher versatility, with a younger quarterback on an explosive offensive team.
All right. So before I get to Harry as a player, I'm going to talk about the situation for a second. So if we're looking at his surrounding cast, or the players that were there that last year that are no longer there this year, first you look at Rob Gronkowski. Gone, retired, he's opening up, red zone targets. You look at Josh Gordon, He's sadly probably as good as gone for the 2019 season and going forward, opening up targets across the middle of the field. You look at Chris Hogan, he's gone, opening up targets down the field, and then you look at Danny Amendola, gone, taking away slot targets. And I think it's very fair to look at N'Keal Harry's college tape and say that he struggles separating. And I agree. While I think the issues are overblown a little bit, I do think that he is not a great separator, definitely not one of the top separators in the class. But look back a few years back, Juju Smith-Schuster, one of the top wide receivers in, I believe, was it the 2017 draft, that was struggling with separation coming out of USC. And what Pittsburgh did is they put him as a big-bodied slot player, operating mostly out of the slot for Big Ben. He uses big body to create mismatches, just like Harry's going to be able to do. Just like Brandon was saying, Juju using his fantastic yards after catch ability, just like Harry has. He was used as a punt returner. I mean, they got him in space. I think that N'Keal Harry will be a great safety blanket for Tom Brady, because I think while he can be a solid outside player, I think he's going to play mainly in the slot, and I think he's going to be a target monster with all those receivers gone. I think he may not be as productive year one as Paris Campbell, just because the situation's not quite as good. But I think looking long term, even after Brady retires, I think N'Keal Harry is the ideal receiver for a young, possibly inaccurate quarterback, because he provides a big body target with a low average depth of target. I mean, looking back to November 2017, N'Keal Harry was my 101 in the 2019 class. Now we're looking at, what are we, in June right now? And he's still my 101 in this class. I'm taking Harry for all those reasons. Not that I dislike Campbell. He was just used a little one-dimensionally at Ohio State. Not to say that he cannot be used as, as a deep threat, as an intermediate threat. It's just that we haven't really seen it yet. I'll take the player that I know has been productive in college, the player that I know can be, flashy with the ball in his hands, whether it's 2 yards down the field or 50 yards down the field. I'll take Harry in the long term.
So, Campbell wasn't productive in college?
Oh, no. I never said he wasn't productive in college. I'm saying
you said you'd take the player that was productive in college, and that seems to imply Campbell wasn't, since you took Harry.
Oh, no. That was not meant to be a knock on Campbell. What was meant to be the knock on Campbell was when I said the low average depth of target. 4.5 yards, I believe, which again is not saying that he cannot do it, but we don't know if he can do it because we have not seen him do it while we have seen Harry do it.
Yeah, we debated whether it was the offense or how it was, how much of it was how Urban Meyer used him versus what he can do, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see. But I kind of agree with Brandon, and that a lot of offenses in the NFL are starting to make use of that. If I have somebody that can break a tackle or is really elusive, why do I need to wait till he's 20, 25 yards down the field to get him the ball? And so Paris Campbell has shown that he's got elite traits when it comes to that. So if he can catch the ball good when he's downfield, I think that his game may translate with a little more diversity than N'Keal Harry's. But I like both players a lot. I'm going to weight the situation towards Campbell more, because this year Andrew Luck was my QB1, and Andrew Luck has 8 or 10 more years. Tom Brady probably has 8 or 10 more years too, because he's a cyborg. But he's certainly, he isn't performing at the level he used to. He still shows flashes. But for me, I feel like Sony Michel is going to have a great big year this year. He's looking at 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns. James White is still going to get his, and Harry is going to have a good year. But for their career, I feel like Paris Campbell is kind of where I'm going based on knowing who his quarterback is going to be for the foreseeable future.
And Dennis, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and this could probably apply to both Harry and Campbell in different ways. But I think that for certain players, the depth of target is not as important as it maybe once was. When you take into account yak and speed and elusiveness, which we all know that Harry definitely has the yak abilities, I think that the depth of target is kind of an overblown argument, especially when it comes to Campbell.
I mean, you guys know who I'm taking. That's not even an argument, really, for me. N'Keal Harry, extremely overrated. Extremely overrated. Give me Paris Campbell all day long. I mean, I know this is going to sound crazy when this comes out of my mouth, but he's playing with the better quarterback because Andrew Luck right now at his point in his career, I think is better than Tom Brady and will be going forward. Tom Brady is only going to be moving down. Now, Tom Brady is a better quarterback overall. Hall of Famer, probably one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback to ever play the game. Andrew Luck is better right now. We don't even know if Tom Brady will be playing next year. We all know he said he wants to play for a couple more years. We don't know that. I agree with Brandon. Tom Brady has never really just, except for outside of Randy Moss, we did see Josh Gordon have a pretty good year with him last year. I just don't think N'Keal Harry steps right in and is the go-to guy for Tom Brady. I also don't think he comes in and replaces Gronk like a lot of people think he is, and them using him as being the big red zone target. Maybe they will. I don't know that for sure, but I do think they're leaning more toward a run-heavy game plan. That's why they drafted Damian Harris. Or it could be because they're worried about Sony Michel's knees, which a lot of that stuff's been coming out too. But I'm going to stick with my point earlier that they're just going to go more run-heavy. I don't think N'Keal Harry is quite as good as many others do. Give me Paris Campbell, a guy who's going to rack up all kinds of yards and touchdowns after the catch in an explosive offense. Guys, go ahead, Kyle, before we close it out. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say one more thing. Just that, I agree with a lot of the points you guys were saying. Matt, when you were saying, this may sound weird coming out of my mouth, but then went on to talk about Luck being better than Brady for now and in the future. I agree. I definitely think Campbell's in the better situation now, but I've also found that, in my years of playing Dynasty, which, I'm only 20 years old, I can't say I've been playing that many years, but in the few years I've been playing Dynasty, I have noticed that whenever I tend to put player situation over player talent, it usually comes back to bite me in the butt, just because in the NFL, situation changes so much. So much can change in a given year from one year to the next. So that's why I'm always hesitant to say, I'm taking this guy because he's in the better situation. While I agree, if we're just looking 2019, I think that's a fair argument. But long term, I just feel like so much could change. I feel like that's just a tough thing to go off of.
I agree with you.
It's a good thing you can get the best of both worlds then, the better talent and the better landing spot.
Oh, that hurts.
Okay, so I wasn't going to go quite as far as Brandon did right there. What I was going to say is kind of try and meet you halfway in the middle there and say, I agree with what you're saying, Kyle. For me, the difference is I don't think the difference in skill set between N'Keal Harry and Paris Campbell is that big of a difference. I think they're a lot closer in skill than other people give them credit for. So that's why, for me, I would lean Campbell, because not only is he maybe, and I would even say a step down from N'Keal Harry, maybe half a step, maybe a pinky toe below N'Keal Harry in skill, and now he's in the better situation with the better quarterback, so that's why I'd go Campbell. Thank you guys so much for jumping on with us tonight. I can't wait to get this up there. I already put up a poll on our little thing, and like I said, we'll figure out a way to pay off this bet, or actually, when you guys have to pay off this bet at the end of the 2019 season. Before we cut out of here, give everybody your Twitter. The name just jumped out of my head, so your Twitters. And if you guys have anything coming up in Dynasty Nerds or any articles you guys are working on you want people to check out.
Sure, you can find me at Dynasty Theorist on Twitter. I write for Dynasty Nerds, and currently working with Dennis on a 32 teams in 32 days. I don't know what the word is. Series, I guess. I'm going to be covering I'm going to be covering the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Redskins. So that's what I have coming up right now. I've got a couple more things in the works, but those will be saved for later.
All right. Yep, you can find me on Twitter at DynastyFF_KyleM. I am also working on the 32 Teams in 32 Days series. I'm writing about my personal favorite team, the Jets. And for Dynasty Nerds, I'm also currently working on an article where I'm looking at historical trends among productive rookie wide receivers and determining which factors to look for in their rookie profile to determine, how to sift through these receivers, see if, this productive rookie receiver may go on to have 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, or maybe if their rookie year is potentially the most productive year in their career. So I'm kind of researching that topic, and I'm finding some really cool stuff. So I'm really excited to put that out there.
So if you're writing about the Jets, Kyle, do the tears translate to the internet?
Oh, gosh. If you're scrolling through my article, I expect, the 3 or 4 people that actually read it based on, who wants to read about the Jets from a fantasy perspective, but tossed in there, you'll see the occasional sad face, crying face, an occasional screenshot of me with a tear rolling down my cheek where, there should be a picture of the Jets logo. It's a great read.
I just want you to put a gif of Adam Gase's crazy eyes in there, man. It'll be worth the read just for that right there.
So you can find me here on Fantasy Football Roundtable with Matt. He allows me to keep coming back. So I appreciate him, and I appreciate that.
For now, there's interviews for replacements in the works at the moment.
That's right. We'll be up at the Fantasy Football Expo. Don't forget, August 18th. Use the code KNIGHTS, KNIGHTS, for $5 off your admission. I am also working on the 32 Teams in 32 Days. The Chargers just came out today. We got a little off sequence there, but that's out. I forget I've signed up for a couple other teams. Tried not to be a hog about it. Let's see. Still, once I finish those up, I got my deep stashes by division I got to get back to. Still working on the AFC West is where I'm at. So, having a ton of fun. I love talking Dynasty and playing Dynasty. We all just completed a draft in the Infinity Gauntlet League, which is going to be kind of crazy, trying to get the Infinity Stones so we can win the Empire League there. That's going to be fantastic.
Very excited about that league.
Yeah, we'll have to bring you back on so we can kind of discuss that on a later date. Just want to discuss different formats and different leagues people can try out, and that's definitely one of the more interesting ones, especially if you don't read the rules when you start drafting. It makes it even more interesting. So
exactly, Matt.
We'll definitely bring you on again here in a couple of weeks so we can talk about that league, how the draft went, because I do think it was a very interesting draft as well.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and have yourselves a great day and a good weekend.
Right on. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on. See you guys.
Prepare for glory!
I want to know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready. And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly. Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line. Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
Seasons change. Spring training slides into the regular season. Summer cools into fall. Leaves change their color. Lives change their shape. Change is life's only constant. AAA Insurance is here to be your guide through life's journey. Protect what matters most. Make sure you have the right insurance for whatever season of life you're in. Talk to your local AAA insurance agent today. Visit AAA.com for details.
This Saturday only, Old Navy's famous flip-flops are $1. Plus, get free flip-flops when you spend $24 or more in-store or online. Saturday only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 6/15, solid color only, limit 10 in stores, 5 online, free offer valid before noon PST.